Hello again, everyone, and welcome to 90s to Now. I am Jerry Strauss. Thank you for joining us. Of course, like, share, subscribe, so you can catch up on all past, present, and future interviews like the one we are about to have right now. We have with us this time out, uh, you know, eh, besides anyone with the last name of Bundy, probably the most famous Al of the 90s in the sitcom world, certainly. And she's with us, Christine Lakin. How are you?
Hey, Jerry, I'm really well, thanks.
No, I'm glad to
For
hear
having
that.
me. Yeah.
Of course, you know Christine from so many different things, but many of us grew up with her on Step by Step. I'm trying to avoid the cliched stuff because I have in my mind, like, obviously that's what this show is, right? Like, we're catching up with people to see what they're doing and, talking about where we first got to know them and everything. But I've got this image in my head of, and you must have experienced this, like every morning show, every like morning, just something about any morning show where they're interviewing stars that we've known from sort of a different time. And they always use those phrases like, now she's all grown up and fill in the blank and,
Right.
hunting elephant in the safari, like whatever it is, like it's always such a weird segue. So, try to avoid that, but obviously you are grown up and people first got to know you when you were young. Not that you're not young. I'm going to start over.
No, I'm well aware of how old I am, Jerry. So you're not. It's no surprise to me.
Okay.
So it's all good.
So it's okay if I hold up like the sands of time,
Yeah, the
or
sands of time, the sands of time. This is your life. This is just becoming like a retrospective on, you know. Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of different things in my career. I had someone say to me yesterday, I was in the voiceover booth doing a project, and my director, who I've worked with so many times, he just went, "Christine, you have so many jobs." I said, "I know, I do." And I guess at one point I thought maybe like I would just, some of them would go away and I would just really be focused on the one. And
Yeah.
that just hasn't seemed to be my trajectory. I've like from the time I was little, and I guess sort of after Step by Step, I just started doing all kinds of things. And all of these things sort of blossomed into like mini careers. So I think a lot of people don't know that about me. So I mean, that's one thing we could kind of delve into. I know a
Yeah.
lot of people know me from, the show, or having been an actress for a long time in my 20s and early 30s. But there were so many, small little things that I said yes to that really became now such a big part of my life, whether it's choreography, which I've been doing for almost 20 years, which is crazy, in film and television. And more recently directing. I mean, I've been a writer, I've been a producer, I've been a podcast host, I've done live shows. It feels like I have a voiceover career that I still is keeps me very busy. I don't know, I guess I just never I'm not good at saying no.
And that's
When it
it's a
comes
good
to the
problem to
stuff I
have, though,
love.
right?
Yeah, yeah. I think
Yeah.
so. I also think as an actor, like for me anyway, I always wondered like, oh God, I did this job, but like, where's my next job? Like, where's my next job coming from?
Yeah.
And I like to work. I like to work. I like to create. I'm very inspired by that all the time. So
I think some people are born this way and some people kind of just learn to be this way, but some of us just can't have, like, we're not comfortable just having one thing and going from one thing to the other. You have to have a few balls in the air.
yeah, for sure. I think that that's definitely been my personality type.
Yeah.
Um, and in my business too, not everything is linear, right? So I don't just go into an office every day and kind of do what I'm meant to do and then leave. Like the thought of having like a proper office is
Yeah.
kind of a fantasy for me. I'm like, oh my God, I think about all these people like go to their office. Like that must be so luxurious. Which I know
God.
sounds crazy because I'm like in the corner of my room, just like, running away, trying to like get stuff done and going to this job and going to that job. And, I mean, sets are really fun, but let's be honest, sets are like glorified camping. So you're
Mhm.
sitting on a chair and bringing your water and making sure you have 14 layers because you never know if it's going to be warm or cold. I mean, this is the reality of set life.
Mhm.
So it is really fun. It is really collaborative. I know nothing else. Um, but it is not always the luxurious experience everyone assumes that it is. Craft service is nice, but
Well, look, you've mentioned a lot of things, and we're going to hit on all of them
yeah,
in this episode. But I want to ask you right off the bat because, our show is 90s to now. And let's face it, this is not an original idea, right? Like, we're just riding this wave of 90s nostalgia that has become, it feels like it's become almost like a parallel to modern day content. Like, people are watching, Friends and Family Matters and Step by Step almost as much as they're watching like present day shows. Did you ever think that like your your time back then, the early part of your career back then, your step by step days would be coming back and people would be continuing to, want to talk about it and want to focus on it and want that to be sort of a part of who you are in 2023? Like, is that odd to you at this point?
yeah, it's definitely. I don't think I ever had a foresight that there would be, especially during that time in television would feel so nostalgic.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone could have really predicted that. Um, I think I understand the reason why, because regardless of me being an actor on those shows, I was a fan of those shows. I was the target audience. I was 12 years old. I
Mhm.
watched TGIF before I was ever on it. I had my friends over on Friday nights and we would like sit around and watch these shows like with my parents. And I think there's very few that still have that kind of, you know, feel good energy behind them. And so I get why people feel that way about it. I certainly, now looking back on it, would love to watch. I've tried to watch the show with my kids. My kids are my youngest is he has a lot of opinions about a lot of things. So he's not as much of a fan as I would maybe hope he would be.
Oh, he's a critic.
He's a critic.
Oof.
My daughter's into it. I mean, she's getting more and more into it. My son not so much. But that being said, I think certainly at the time doing it, I knew it was special. Like I did have the I guess I did have the foresight to understand that what we were doing and how long it went on was
Mhm.
really special because that doesn't happen a lot.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of appreciation, a lot of gratitude for it, for sure.
Yeah.
But I definitely didn't think that people would still be talking about it today.
Well, 7 seasons that are still readily available for people to check out, and they're doing it every day, every hour of every day. Somebody is watching step by step. For you, you mentioned it. You were watching TGIF shows before you ever became a part of that world. This was only like your second job, right? Like, in as far as acting goes, how big of a I mean, how did that go down actually? Like, how because that had to feel like this huge opportunity to step into so early in your career.
Yeah, I mean, I had been working as an actor actually for a couple years, but in Atlanta.
Okay.
So I had done, a half dozen national commercials. I had done a bunch of regional commercials. I'd done a movie with Christopher Reeve for TNT. I had done like a bunch of theater. So I, it wasn't like it was, the first time I ever sat foot on a set, but it was very different. I had never done a sitcom before, and I had
Yeah.
certainly never even guest starred on a sitcom before. So, um, I was doing theater in Atlanta, and I kind of one of those classic stories. I was spotted by a manager, and that manager kind of kept in touch with my mom over the course of a year. And my parents weren't really interested in taking me out of school and leaving our life and going and like hitting the pavement and like trying to get me a job. My parents
Right.
were just helping me follow my dreams, but it wasn't going to be like at the expense of like an education or like uprooting our family. That just wasn't in the cards.
Mm-hmm.
So everything I was doing was really on a local level, anything that came through Atlanta. So my mom took me to LA for my spring break. And it was really just like a mother-daughter trip. I was so enamored with everything Hollywood. And it was just really about her and me, like having fun, having a great time. And while we were here, we met the manager and we said hi. And, she said, "Oh, you should make a tape because I don't have any way to represent you without a tape." Back then, there was no Zoom and no, online. So you literally had to make a large tape
Yeah.
and then reproduce that tape and send it around. So that's what we did. And a couple months later, this role came up on Step by Step. And there's some like minutia to the story where I was filming. I was filming this monologue, and the producer of Step by Step, Bob Boyette, happened to be in the control booth at the time and walked by and saw me. And it was just a lot of kismet, a lot of luck. And 2 months later, then they were trying to find this one last character, and they were auditioning everyone in LA, and they just didn't feel like they really had it. He remembered walking by the control booth and seeing this girl doing this monologue.
Wow.
And said, "Well, let's try to find her."
Yeah.
And so we got a call, and my dad had frequent flyer miles, and he said, "Hey, do you want to go out and audition for this thing? It might be a fun story one day." Like, no intention of getting the job.
Right.
No, like, here we go, like, let's book it. Like, it was just all low stakes.
Yeah.
Came out, did the audition, found out the next day I got the pilot. We were here for 2 weeks. We shot the pilot. But people get fired after pilots. Pilots don't go. Like, there was no like, "Oh, here it is. Here's the job. Here's the big break." Like, there was no real reckoning. Certainly not in my mind. I was 12. I was just like, here's another gig that I did. It was super fun. Now I'm back to 6th grade, And then when we found out the pilot got picked up, it was a little more like, "Oh, how are we going to do that? We got to move to LA for part of the year? Like, how's that going to work?" But luckily my dad he's traveled quite a lot for business. And he was like, "Here's how you do it. We get a corporate apartment, we rent everything. And you don't worry too much."
Okay.
Because if it's a month-to-month situation, and if the show doesn't go, no harm, no foul, you come home.
Nice.
So it just and then it just kind of kept going and going and going, and we fine-tuned what that was. And but no one could have predicted it. And certainly I don't think even my mom, my dad, myself, there was no real understanding that it was like, because in the beginning that show was not a hit. It was not doing well. They had a lot of belief in it. And unlike today, if a show doesn't do well in the first 2-3 episodes, they can it. But back then, they were like, we really want to make this work, and we want to fine tune it. We think there's something here, and we have these 2 incredible stars, and it's such a great idea. And there was legacy to the people that created that show. They had created Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley and Full House and Family Matters. So, they knew what they were doing. And they gave us the time. And after we got that pickup for the 2nd season, it was like, okay, I think this might have some legs.
Yeah. It's amazing.
And
it built. You mentioned the 2 incredible stars. Of course, you're talking about, the incredible performers who played the parents on the show, Patrick Duffy, Suzanne Somers. Suzanne Somers, already at that point a sitcom icon, specifically one of the most famous, memorable sitcoms of all time. Patrick Duffy, of course, a star in his own right. What was the environment like for you? You're 12, you're brand new to the sitcom world, and you've got, these 2 big stars, specifically Suzanne, who just knows that arena like nobody else. What was the chemistry like between you and them, and you and the other kids, and just, like the whole pseudo family situation? How what was the temperature of the room like in the beginning, and how did that evolve?
The temperature was always really friendly. It was really loving. It was really open. It was really accepting. I feel like everybody, especially those stars, they met all of us where we were. There was never any sense of, well, I'm a big star and you need to watch me, or at all. Like, they are two of the excuse me, they're two of the most grounded, really generous people I've ever worked with. And that says a lot because, certainly at 12, I knew who Suzanne Somers was. I had watched reruns of Three's Company. But again, in my mind, like, I only knew her from watching the reruns. Like, I didn't really know the gravitas of her as like an icon. And Patrick Duffy, a lot of people in the beginning said, "You mean the guy from Dallas? He's not funny. How could he be in a sitcom?" People didn't know. People didn't know how funny he was and what a jokester, what a prankster. I mean, there were so many things in our show that weren't even written that he would just come up with, like gags, physical comedy. That was just his personality. And he and Suzanne got along great. They were really fast friends, and they laughed a lot, and they supported each other a lot. So I think for all of us watching, obviously we were all at different levels. I had never done a sitcom before. Then you have Stacey Keenan, who was like, at that point, kind of a veteran of sitcoms. She'd been doing this for a really long time. Yeah. Brandon Call, coming off of Baywatch, he was already kind of a heartthrob. So everyone was kind of like a little bit in their own lane, but there was never any feeling like someone was better than the other person. And I give Suzanne and Patrick a lot of that credit because they never acted like that at all. That's and amazing. They never set that tone. And yeah. I truly believe now, when I step onto a set, the stars, and especially if you have big stars, they set the vibe. Yeah. Because no one can be a jerk if the biggest star on set's not a jerk. Right. I mean, it just doesn't give you, and also like the producers, the big producers, the showrunners, they also set the vibe. Yeah. And I mean, it was an incredible experience, and it was an incredible learning experience. There were so many times when Patrick would direct, and he would, especially for me, who hadn't done this, like learning sitcom blocking, learning, timing, like watching them at the peak of their sort of, comedy brilliance. Like that was, I absorbed all of it. And it was just an incredible training ground for all of it if you wanted to keep your eyes open.
Yeah. And clearly you have to believe that you were like kind of a sponge, because you have been able to take so much of, your early career and just keep it rolling and expand it to different directions. And like, I'm sure there were a lot of things that you learned on that set, maybe that you didn't even know you were learning, but that, it's kind of like the Karate Kid thing, like
right.
Muscle memory and mind memory. And, for those who your memory might be a little foggy of Step by Step. Of course, Christine played Alicia Al Lambert, right? Who was the younger daughter, a tomboy in the early part of the show. And then you kind of evolved, you grew up 7 seasons. So I want to ask you, like, how did you enjoy that evolution? Like, did you enjoy her more when she was younger and more tomboyish, or kind of growing into more of a teenager, for lack of a better term?
Yeah. I mean, I think it was pretty natural, the writers, especially during that first season, were really trying to get to know us personally, because I think it just helped give them ideas. It helped give them, a real sense of our personalities. I wasn't necessarily as much of a tomboy as Al was, but I also wasn't like super girly girl either. So I loved her toughness. I loved her assertiveness. It was something I really latched onto. I loved because I was tiny. I've always been so tiny in my life. And she felt like when I got to be her, she felt 12 feet tall all the time. She had all the confidence in the world. And wasn't really, or pretended as though she wasn't scared of anything. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that part of it, even if that's not how I truly felt in my life all the time. I think like and she was good at sports, which like I never was good at sports. So there was like part of me that like it was fun to put on that mask, it was fun to put on that like suit. But I think as I started to get a little older, it just became more apparent. Like, the writers would see me in the way I would dress, and I was clearly like going through puberty, and I wasn't personally wearing like high tops and backwards hats all the time. So I think that it was just a natural progression of, okay, who does this character become if because at some point it's going to start feeling false.
Yeah.
We can't keep Al in a backwards hat until she's like 18. I mean, maybe if that had been more of my personality, maybe it would have rung really true. But I was interested in fashion, and at the time it was the 90s. Like I just wanted to be like Stacy and Angela. Like I looked up to them. We were all really close friends. I was like the little sister, definitely. But I just wanted to wear whatever they were wearing. And I was like really, I was really into that. So they let the character evolve, but they definitely kept a lot of her personality traits. And I really appreciated that it wasn't just this, oh, one day she comes down in a dress and she's a totally different person.
Right.
Like it's not the way people are.
That's more like 90s movies. TV shows didn't go there. It was really just every other 90s teen movie that did.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to jump around here a little bit because, again, you've done so many different things and continue to, like you've talked about. A lot of people know your voice, or maybe they don't know your voice, or they know your voice but don't know it's your voice from Family Guy. Plus, so many video games. You mentioned audiobook narrations. Like, you're all over the place behind a microphone without a camera on you.
Yeah.
How did you get into that gig, and how do you compare the experience to being in front of a camera? Like, is that something that you relish the opportunity to continue to be able to do?
Oh yeah. I mean, my voiceover career was, again, it was like one of these things I sort of fell into. I think I was in my late 20s. I was doing a lot of theater with my local theater company, the Troubadour Theater Company. And a friend of mine knew Seth MacFarlane and invited him to the show, and he came. And we like chatted after and had some drinks, and he's like, oh, we should get you to come in and do some voices. And I was like, I mean, I would love to. So I did some table reads for them, and I would fill in for people, or I would just do random voices just so, the writers could really hear it. And I think that was probably like an unofficial audition process, maybe. And then they started to bring me in to do a couple of little things here and there. And then the role of Joyce Kinney came up, and I got to do that for several years, and it was like such a joy. Anytime they call me, I'd be like, oh my God, yes, I'm there. So what an iconic, show to be a part of. And that led to lots of other little things. What people don't understand in the voiceover world is that it is highly competitive. Maybe you wouldn't think so, but there are so many people that want to do it. And there's a small handful of people that do a lot of work. Because they're really well known. And so I, in addition to doing, a bunch of different video games and cartoons, you have to constantly be auditioning like all the time. So I had all these different careers going on, and sometimes it would be like, I can't do all these things at once. It's feast or famine. I mean, that's the way it goes. But the audiobook thing, again, it was just one of those random auditions. Came around. I'd never done one before. I read a sample. I sent it in. I got the job. That's turned into I think it's like 10 years. It's been 10 years that I've been working for basically one company. And after I, did so many books of all genres, it started with vampire YA books. And that was like a big genre for a while. So like everything was a vampire. And then I've done nonfiction. I'm reading one about Helen Keller right now and her life, which is fascinating. I feel like I've gotten smarter over the years with this job because I really have read about a lot of things that I did not have um, knowledge in intimate detail about. But the thing I like about it is, aside from that, is, you know, what I also think people don't realize about that job is that it is highly um, you need a lot of stamina, and it's also highly technical. So the cadence with which you read, um, the pronunciation and the dictation, like it goes a lot back to my old theater training. And I guess that's just a skill that I didn't realize I could use for something else.
I was gonna
But
ask because we're kind of we're blanketing all this voiceover work together, but really a very different skill set to just, read from a script and do like a Family Guy episode, for example, as opposed to doing a book. I mean,
yeah,
it's a marathon versus a sprint in a lot of ways, I have to believe, right?
very much so. And but what I do like about it is, especially when I'm reading, when I'm reading fiction, I do this whole series from Michael Connelly, and I play Renee Ballard. She's the female detective that has teamed up with Harry Bosch. And again, I feel the same way, even though I'm behind a microphone and usually in some form of like sweatshirt. Um, I feel the same way when I can put on that kind of like actor suit of who this person is. I have never been a detective in my life, but man, I feel powerful when I get to be her because
Mm.
she is smart and she is fearless and she's a badass. And like, I love playing that character. Um, and I feel that way with all kinds of things. I do different voices for different people. I have images in my mind of who they are and how they walk and how they talk. And so to me, it's the same thing, but I get to play even more people. I play men, I play old women, I play little kids. Like I play all these different people, which I would never get cast on camera as these people. So it's actually been very freeing as an actor, and I really enjoy it. And I get to go to work in my PJs, and I leave at 3:30, and I go pick up my kids. I mean, it's pretty great.
These are all amazing things, all amazing
Yeah.
things. Um, you talked about being behind the microphone, not in front of a camera, and a whole other category of work that you do is you've emerged as a director, which
Yeah.
is an entirely different thing than what we're talking about now, because you're not embodying the characters, but you're still helping to kind of create and shape and form the worlds that will be captured and that will be brought to the viewers. Where did that start for you? Was that like something that you'd been interested in doing from the early days, or did that also just kind of come out of nowhere when you least expected it?
A little of both. When I was young, before Step by Step, excuse me, my dad loves gadgets. My dad is in telecommunications. He's an engineer. We always had gadgets growing up. When I say gadgets, it's like the latest video camera, um, microphones, just all kinds of stuff at our house. So when I was in third grade, I started playing around with video cameras. And from third, fourth, fifth grade, I all my book reports were films that I would make. That's all I wanted to do.
Mm,
So I think like that was probably the first seeds of me wanting to make my own things. And obviously, acting really took over at a certain point, sixth, seventh grade. Um, but I remember in ninth grade, I had to read Hamlet, and we had to do like a big report on it. And I asked, can I do like a like a short film?
yeah.
And my teacher said, sure, if you want. So Angela Watson was in it. My boyfriend at the time was in it. Like we shot it, like guerrilla style, like in front of a church. I played two different characters. I was Mercutio. I'm driving around in a car. I was like obsessed with Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet. So I basically made my own, Hamlet via Romeo and Juliet. Like it was all very angry and very, contemporary. And I was obsessed with all of that stuff. So I think there were seeds like very early on. And then it was really, I think, I had a couple things. I had written a show called Love and Lakin, which was just an inspiration I had. I wrote this series, this digital series. My friend helped me shoot it. A bunch of my friends came and played in it. We sold it to Hulu. And I think that was like in my early 30s was a big shift for me because it wasn't just about sitting around and waiting to get the audition and hoping to get the job. I was actually very proactive in making something and it felt really good. And I realized when I did that, like, oh, I think this is where it's at for me. So I just kept trying to figure out how to replicate that feeling. And I did live shows, that I produced. Like I was out of that live show, we made a TV pilot that I hosted. So there were a lot of like little things during that time. At the same time, I had this choreography career that started, which is a whole other thing. I'd been a competition dancer when I was a kid. When I got Step by Step, that sort of ended because I wasn't going to dance class every Friday. But I had a lot of knowledge again and like sort of structured teaching from an early age, and that was my sport because I like wasn't good at baseball. So dance was my sport. So anyway, in my mid-20s, I was doing a movie called Reefer Madness. I was up in Vancouver for a long time. And the choreographer, Marianne Kellogg, asked if I would skeleton crew for her, which meant she was making up these dances and she needed bodies to see how things looked. And so I learned a lot from her in that time. And it led to a couple years later, I worked on a Disney film called You Again here in Los Angeles. I had an acting part in it, but Marianne was also choreographing a few of the scenes again. And she asked me at times to assist her. And from those two little jobs, a couple of ADs, assistant directors, had my name and called me into whatever their next thing was. So the first thing was True Blood. So I did like 3 episodes of True Blood. Okay. And really what I was doing was, yes, I was choreographing, but I was really working a lot. And I realized my niche was working with actors who might not have dance as their first special skill. Mm-hmm. So I was finding movement for actors that told the story that looked good on them. And I was building their confidence at the same time.
I was actually going to say your niche apparently was vampires.
Yeah, I know. Everything starts with vampires for me. It's crazy. So in the middle of doing like a lot of writing and producing, I had these little choreography jobs that I was just building. And then the Goldbergs came around 10 years ago. And we still don't know who brought me in, but I got brought in. And from that point on, I've choreographed, I think, almost every episode. A couple of them my assistant choreographed when I couldn't do it or I was pregnant or whatever. And that has been honestly one of the most incredible experiences of my career, working with that group of people, not only as a choreographer, but then 5 years into it, I guess I was sitting around and I was looking at all of these people and, you sit behind a monitor as you do and wait for, your scene to come up. And I just thought to myself, why am I not directing? Like it was like a light bulb went off in my head. I know this job in and out. I've been doing this for 20 something years at that point. And I was like, I know how to talk to an actor. I know where to put the camera. I know what the movement should be because even I call everything choreography. Even when I'm blocking a scene, we start here, we come around. As you come around, the camera moves this way. Like everything is choreography in my head. So it became a 5-year process of me really trying to shift into this new thing. And I really think the choreography credits that I had and the fact that I had worked with actors that way was finally the thing that helped me kind of shift. And the Goldbergs gave me an episode and they've since brought me back 11-ish times, something like that. So, and then I've been able to, get my foot in the door and at Apple and a little bit at Disney. But I realized like to do that job, people come at it from so many different ways. You could go to film school and learn all the technical, right? And you have lots of practice. Yeah. And you have to put all of that stuff into practice. And if you've never spoken to like an actor that wasn't in your film program, or a really big star,
Yeah.
or someone who doesn't want to come out of their trailer that day because they're going through something. Like, I've been in lots of scenarios as an actor already. So I think there is so much practical knowledge that you just can't teach. Um, and then of course, like, I was like, well, I want to do this job. Like, I better make sure I really know how to do it. So I got my hands on a camera again, and I shot everything I could,
Mm.
whether it was a Funny or Die video or a friend short or a music video. Like, I just kept shooting and shooting and shooting and shooting, because it's the only way you get more confident in what you do. And now I'm just at a point where it's like all I want to do.
It's
So
awesome. It's awesome because, I mean, you're doing it right, Christine, because your career has also been your education. And how many
completely.
people can actually say that? Like,
That's true. Yeah.
they waste so much time doing the schooling and the training to point them in the direction in life they think they wanna go to hopefully get there, but you kinda did it, you skipped that whole step. You're just, evolving from the work that you've already wanted to do just to do more work that you wanna do.
Yeah, I mean, and I did pay a lot of money to go to UCLA, but I love my school, but I didn't. It's interesting because I didn't necessarily go there for what specifically I ended up doing. And I think I think
That's
that's
typical.
normal for a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
But what is it? What There's a Mark Twain quote where he says something like, "Don't let school get in the way of your education." And I think that's really true for me anyway.
It's so true. Well, I mean, we could go on and on and on. We've talked about so many different things you've done. What is something that you have not yet done in your career? Like, what's next? Like, what weird thing is it? Like a do you wanna record, like, an electro punk, like, record, like, that sells really well in Japan? Like, what what do you see as, like, that next thing to check off on your list?
Oh god, well, it's gonna have to do with vampires, right? Whatever it is.
Sounds
No,
on
I
brand,
think
yeah.
I really wanna focus on a feature. That's my next thing.
Okay.
And I don't know exactly what it is, but I have some ideas.
On directing?
Yeah,
Okay.
directing the feature. So, and I think, listen, I have a lot of admiration for directors, and especially, very fancy directors. And I also think that as an audience member, maybe we need some levity in our films lately.
Mm,
So I just, like, back in the 90s when we would sit around and be like, God, why does it feel good just to watch this show? Why is it just easy to watch some of these 90s shows? And
yeah.
like, I go back to, with my husband, we turn on HBO and sometimes I say, I just want to watch a movie I know already because I know I'm going to like it. And
Yeah.
I know it's going to make me laugh. And I know it's going to make me feel good. And I know I'm not going to fall asleep. No shade, but so yeah, I want to find something that's got a lot of those elements in it. So we'll see.
That that's cool, and
Yeah.
look, as we said, you are continuing to at least show love and service those who also show love to your work of the past in a couple of different ways. We talked about it actually before we started recording, and we missed the boat on the deadline for those who want to participate. But you did a charity buzz auction recently that I thought was really cool. You did it with Melissa Joan Hart, Jodie Sweetin, Jenna Von Oy, a bunch of '90s OGs from the TV world, and you guys, you're doing like a Zoom party for somebody
Yeah.
who donated money to a really great cause to from the Heart Productions. How fun is that? Like, just to, once in a while to just kind of scratch that itch.
Oh,
You
yeah.
guys are still pretty tight, huh? Like that crew from back in the
Yeah.
day.
I mean, I saw Jody recently just on my birthday. And we did a show together, and it was such an incredible experience. And then I would always run into Melissa because Melissa directs too. So sometimes we would cross paths when we were doing different episodes of the same show. And I mean, she's just such a powerhouse and always has been. She produces, she acts, she directs, she does it all. And then Jenna and I, like, we used to live in the same apartment building when we were kids.
Oh,
She lived on the
geez.
3rd floor. I think we lived on the 2nd floor. So there's a lot of history there. And it's anytime I feel like it's like we were in this weird sorority
Mm,
of, the 90s. And anytime someone's like, hey, I need help, here's what I'm asking. To me, it's always like, yeah, when do you want me? When do you need me? What can I do? You
that's
know,
awesome.
the Cassandra Project is, I think, a really incredible idea. That we raised money for this trilogy of short films, and each one is going to highlight women and stories, highlighting stories that where women are disbelieved or their voices are shuttered. And
Mm.
it's important, in the medical community. It's important when we talk about silencing victims. So anything I could do to, lend a little helping hand to that. And I think the Zoom will be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to that. I think it's going to be
Sounds
great.
it sounds wild, and another thing that sounds wild is another project, one of many that I know you have coming up, but this is cool. You're diving back into the podcast space, and you are doing it with an old friend, Stacey Keenan. You guys are going back to revisit step by step, piece by piece, episode by episode, right?
We are. Yes, we have actually recorded all of season 1. So we're just figuring out how we're going to launch. And it's been such a blast because I just adore Stacey, and it's been an amazing excuse to get together, every couple of weekends and record some episodes and just kind of chat and laugh. And we go through the episodes one by one, starting with season 1. We
Mhm.
sort of do like a mini recap, but we also chat about it. We chat about the things we remember, about the time period, whether the joke holds up, what is that outfit. And then and which is really great because she never watched the show. This is the first time she's ever watched the show,
Oh,
ever.
wow.
She
Wow.
never wanted to watch it. She didn't want to see herself in it. She just wasn't interested. And so we talk about that. And then we also just talk about, like, bigger things, about, I mean, silly things like, whether, what was the worst time you ever got in trouble? Like, when did you ever sneak out? What was your vibe at this time? Who were you dating? Like, all of that kind of stuff. And like all the little things that happened on our show, like the behind the scenes memories that, it's so hard to jog your memory with that unless you sit there with somebody who went through it too.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, remember this? So it's been really fun. It's called Keenan and Lakin Give You Deja Vu. So look
Awesome.
for it soon.
Awesome. We will look out for that. And of course, where would you like people to follow you? Because I'm sure announcements from you keep people pretty updated on all the things you got going on, right? Social media.
Yeah. Yeah, you can find me. I put my name right there. You can find me at Yo Lakin. Yo Lakin. Lakin.
Or
I'm
or
pretty much
just
on, like,
yell it
social
to
media.
if you see her
Yeah,
across the street, she responds to that as well.
I
So
do actually. And I have some people at work that call me that. They go, "Yo, Lakin," and I turn around. I'm like, "Yo, who's saying that? What's up?"
awesome. Awesome. Well, Christine, thank you so much. I know that you're very busy, so even taking this time to do this is was a lot to ask. So thank you
No,
so much for doing
thanks
it,
for
man.
having me. Thanks for the great interview. I appreciate it.
Likewise, likewise. And thank you guys for checking us out this time here on 90s to Now. Again, make sure you like, subscribe, share, tell a friend, tell your family, yell at Christine Lakin, yo, from across the street, whatever you need to do to show that you listened and that you support, and we appreciate it. And thanks again, Christine.
Thank you.